We have more news coming up for you later. Time now for the France 24 debate. We're waiting for the French president to speak. Emmanuel Macron in Beirut for the second time inside of a month. This after that blast at the port. He's at the French ambassador's residence where for the past few hours he's been meeting from people from across Lebanon's spectrum. It's been a momentous day there. It was the day when Parliament, by a very wide margin, approved a new prime minister. The day when the country marks its centennial as a modern state. It was under French protectorate for decades. And this was the scene a little while earlier when protesters, some of them using makeshift battering rams, tried to storm a parliament. Yes, between COVID, an economic meltdown, and the protests that have been going on since last October, the pressure in Lebanon is on that confessional power-sharing system that's existed since the 1920s, but that's also been, you might say, cemented since the end of Lebanon's civil war in 1990. And with us to speak about it, just back from Beirut, where for the French investigative news magazine, he filed a piece for reporters, France 24's Bilal TARABEY. Welcome back to the France 24 debate.
Hello, François.
We're also pleased to welcome here in our studios activist Lionel CHAMI, works here in Paris. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Heady days or depressing days? I don't know which would you call it in one word.
Well, it's a bit of an emotional roller coaster. On the one hand, Macron's visit aims to bring hope to Lebanon. On the other hand, we civil society activists fear that, it might be just a return to normal.
All right, let's cross to Beirut, of course, and journalist Sophia AMARA is there. Always a pleasure to see you, Sophia. Especially now, because I know it's a bit touch and go, what with power outages and always the chance that your Skype connection might go blip.
Yeah, definitely. This is Lebanon, so it might happen. Very happy. Thanks for having me, François.
Sophia, the mood today compared to the mood on just after August 4th when Emmanuel Macron made that first visit after that blast that killed 183 and left thousands injured.
Yeah. The mood is really different. When President Macron arrived in Beirut less than 48 hours after the double blast in Beirut's port, everybody was happy and comforted to see him because, as we know, the politicians didn't even go on the ground because they were afraid to be yelled at or even be targeted by violences by the people who had it with this political class. Now things are different because 3 weeks have passed. Nothing has been done only by the NGOs and the social, the civil society. And now some Lebanese accuse President Macron of having imposed or accepted at least a prime minister, a new prime minister who was designated only few hours before the President Macron got back to Beirut yesterday night, and to impose a prime minister who is part of the system, whereas the protesters since October of last year have been asking over and over for new figures, new people, not corrupted, not part of the system, experts who could take out Lebanon from its double crisis, economical and financial crisis.
But Sophia, we read an interview with Emmanuel Macron in Politico when he was flying over, and he said, I can't impose that from abroad. It can't come from a foreign leader.
Yes, indeed. And he answered very clearly. He said, these people, this is your choice. The parliament is your choice. You elected these deputies, these member of parliament. I cannot impose. Lebanon is a country, a free country. But yet, indeed, later, when the crisis will be finished, you as young people have to create a new political class, a new system. And he asked already for a new political pact, but yet he cannot do anything, because if he had supported the prime minister, who's the choice of the protesters, who is a very respected judge, then he couldn't do anything, because he wouldn't have the support of the parliament, and then he couldn't be able to work. So for Emmanuel Macron and for the people who support this choice, the new prime minister is the best case, or the best scenario, with the actual situation that we have with a parliament that is elected by the people, and we cannot change a parliament, as Emmanuel Macron explained, but yet he called for elections within 6 and 12 months for the Lebanese.
The connection seems to be dipping out a little bit there. The connection's dipping out slightly. Yeah, elections between 6 and 12 months, said the French president. He wants to see concrete reforms, Lionel CHAMI, within 3 months. And again, it's this question of, did you want the French president to espouse reform or revolution here?
Well, on the one hand, it's complicated to ask a foreign president to endorse a domestic revolution, because we, civil society activists, have always been opposed to foreign interference of foreign powers into our affairs. And we stated that
especially
clearly.
The former colonial power in this instance.
Well, yes, but all powers intervene in our affairs, whether it's Iran, Turkey, the US, Saudi Arabia, or France. So France is only one participant in that great game that goes over Lebanon right now. So you can't really ask the French president to endorse the revolution, but then on the one hand, you can see that street protests have not had their effects, to the extent that politicians have not enacted the reforms, and these reforms may only be enacted if a foreign power comes in. Now, that's not the ideal option, because we're opposed to foreign interference, but then on the other hand, you see these politicians have laundered their money from public funds in the Western capitals in Europe, in London, in Paris, in Nice, and Monaco, and they've done this with impunity. So on the other hand, there's this complicity of foreign powers that could be compensated with personal sanctions against these same politicians.
Now let's listen to the French president, Emmanuel Macron, speaking earlier in the day.
It is the beginning. It is the foundation of a new stage. Whether it will be followed by action, it's too early to say. I am not naive. I'm going to put pressure so that we form a government, that these reforms pass, that they pass with commitment from the government, the president of the parliament.
So Bilal TARABEY, how do those words go down with the quote-unquote street in Beirut?
I mean, this is exactly why we've called our report Lebanon Année Zéro. This is definitely year zero. This can be a really new beginning for Lebanon. But Emmanuel Macron cannot do more than put pressure on Lebanese politicians. That's exactly like Lionel said. I mean, there is a very thin line between interference and helping. So Emmanuel Macron right now has the leverage of the international community money. This is with leverage that he's trying to push for a change.
When he's speaking later, and we can show live images outside the French ambassador's residence, which, by the way, is a sumptuous estate that was once where Charles de Gaulle set up shop during World War II. Yes. Will he be speaking just in the name of France, or in the name of the wider, in the name of Europe, the international community, the IMF? There's so many players. Or is he just speaking in the name of one country?
I mean, literally, he's obviously speaking in the name of France, but you don't have to be a PhD in international affairs to understand that he's speaking in the name of the Western countries, international community, meaning Germany, meaning the European Union, Brussels, and eventually the United States, although a senior United States official is expected in Beirut this Wednesday.
The fact that the U.S. is not front and center, Lionel CHAMI, does that change anything for Lebanon?
Well, it does mean that the approach that Macron is following includes Hezbollah. Because Macron has always sought to include Iran in the discussions, to include Hezbollah in the discussions, and considers Hezbollah as a legitimate political party, which the US is opposed to, because the US obviously sees Hezbollah as an Islamist terrorist movement that's linked with Iran. So this approach is radically different than that of the US. So that's the reason why the US is not leading the charge here, but France is.
Yeah, Sophia AMARA, Beirut is always sort of that neutral turf when where all of the region's powers converge to settle scores. Lionel CHAMI making that point about Hezbollah, and the French have been meeting with representatives of the movement. Hezbollah, which to a large degree has the guns in Lebanon.
Yes, indeed. Well, this is the main difference between France and between and the U.S., who just wouldn't discuss with the Hezbollah. Whereas the president, he made it very clear this morning at the port, where he was asked, "Why are you dealing with the Hezbollah, knowing that the European Union consider at least the military wing of this Lebanese party as terrorist?" And he answered that he made a difference between the military and the political wing, which has members of the parliament in the Lebanese parliament. Yet some Lebanese consider that the whole problem comes from the military wing of the Hezbollah, and that it would be really naive to believe that the two wings are not connected to each other. We just had, the verdict of the International Tribunal about the Rafiq Hariri assassination, and the tribunal pointed out at a member of the Hezbollah, who is Salim Ayyash. And despite all this, Hezbollah has member of parliament. And he's doing really realpolitik, Emmanuel Macron, about that. And he knows that for now, if Lebanon wants to get rid of this partner, a very important player in Lebanon, which is Hezbollah, that could lead to something very dangerous, and it could lead to a civil war. And President Emmanuel Macron talked about this risk, the risk of civil war in Lebanon if things don't move, if things don't change. But obviously, for the President Macron, things should change with the Hezbollah.
All right. Bilal TARABEY, we heard on Sunday the Lebanese president, Michel Aoun, saying he's now in favor of a secular state. For people who don't follow Lebanon closely, Aoun is one of those political leaders in Lebanon, he's well into his 80s, who have, in a previous life, were militia leaders or generals. And when you heard that statement, what was your reaction?
Lebanon is already technically a secular state. It's an oral agreement in 1943 called the National Pact, I believe, that has fixed this rule of having a Christian president, a Sunni prime minister, and a Shiite president of parliament. So this has to be very clear. That's first. Second,
it's an unwritten rule.
It's an unwritten rule, exactly. Second of all, Michel Aoun only by himself cannot, absolutely not, implement this kind of change. This has to be an agreement between every party in Lebanon. But every party in Lebanon is a religious-based party, so we're still waiting to see how this can happen.
Well, let me ask you at your personal experience about this, Lionel CHAMI. You were telling us before we went on air, in 2018, part of those trying to gain election without having these affiliations to clans, to religions. How did that go, and could it work in the future?
Well, doing elections as an independent, secular political, campaign in Lebanon is a difficult thing. Why? Because elections in Lebanon are only partly free and they're definitely not fair. They're not free because on the one hand, our candidates were threatened. They were not allowed to perform in certain districts, especially those controlled by Hezbollah. And on the other hand, they're not fair because you see other political parties getting funds from abroad in the tens of millions of dollars, and the electoral law is not implemented on them, meaning there's no checks, there's no law that applies to, say, corruption in the elections. There's no law that applies for bribing voters, and there's no law to limit how much these political parties can appear on TV. So this is really a matter of unfair competition between the civil society on one hand and the political parties at large.
If tomorrow they said, okay, the end of the rule that Bilal was talking about, the president doesn't have to be a Christian, the Speaker of Parliament doesn't have to be a Shia, the Prime Minister doesn't have to be a Sunni, would you agree to that? Would you think that was a good thing?
Well, it depends how it's done, because confessionalism, the fact that the political posts in Lebanon are attributed according to religion, is not just for the head of parliament, for the prime minister and the president. It's also for every MP that gets elected into parliament. So if you want to install a secular state in Lebanon, there's a roadmap for that, and the roadmap is in the constitution. The constitution in Lebanon states that the current regime, the current legal regime of the elections, is a provisional one, and on the long run, we should have a lower chamber that is elected, not according to religion, and a higher chamber, a senate of sorts, that is elected according to religious criteria, and is only there to defend the interests of the communities, while the lower chamber is here to defend the interests of the people.
So why has that not been implemented?
That hasn't been implemented because the political class has a vested stake in not reforming the system. Why? Because during these elections, they hire people into administrations. They put their cronies in all the administration, and they've turned the state into a sort of bribery land where they can just employ whoever they want, steal funds with all impunity.
5 years ago, Sophia AMARA, there was that Beirut stinks movement where people were fed up. It started with anger over the fact that garbage collection was so poor. And at the time, we thought, oh, this is it. There's going to be some great upheaval. Of course, nothing came of it, really. This time around, are we making too much of all of this? Will the usual suspects play for time? And after Emmanuel Macron goes, it'll be back to the same old?
Well, it's a risky possibility. I mean, even President Emmanuel Macron went through a risky bet. I know.
I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to interrupt you, Sophia, because I'm going to interrupt you because I'm going to interrupt you a second, Sophia, because the connection there with Beirut is choppy. Maybe we'll try to call you back and get a better line. I'll put it to you, Bilal.
I was gonna tell you a side story from Lionel words. In 2018, there was this list, I guess, this regroupment of civil society called Beirut Madinati, who came up with the list for the election in the Lebanese capital. So what happened? So we are commenting now from weeks and months how different political figures in Lebanon cannot agree whatsoever on anything. But when they've realized that Beirut Madinati was gaining voice, out of the blue, they all came with a one unique list representing them all against Beirut Madinati, which managed to gain 40-something percent in the city. So out of the sudden, as soon as they see their power is at stake, is at risk, suddenly they gather.
You get a feeling like it's 2012, or 2011, and it's the Arab Spring again with this amazing hope we saw back in December. With I remember people from Paris who were making the trip to go to Martyrs Square in Beirut to be with those who were protesting, and then of course it's hard to sustain it.
I mean, again and again and again, in Lebanon, it's not a matter of one dictator or one monarch or even oligarchy. I mean, we know the six figures, basically, that are ruling Lebanon, but their families are ruling the banking system. Their clientele is inside every administration. I had a word from the former, because we've changed twice government this last month. The former Minister of Foreign Affairs, he said he could not decide anything because the people from his predecessor were still in the different embassies and administration. So this is how deep the connection of these political figures are running through the states, the administrations.
Of course, this is the point where we follow the money, because at the heart of it all is Lebanon's central bank. And there's been this big argument because, well, the country's on the brink right now. The currency's collapsed. People can't get money out of the banks. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, says, we can help. You got to show us the books.
Well, yes, the government has, given license to a firm to perform a forensic audit on the accounts of the central bank. However, the company that was chosen and the guidelines according to which it was chosen weren't clear at all. The company is known to have done lobbying for the Lebanese government before, and it was selected according to very shaky criteria. So the government hasn't really given us any guarantee that this audit is going to be serious and is going to pinpoint at the corruption.
Bilal TARABEY, the French president, you got the sense, because there have been donor conferences hosted right here in the French capital for Lebanon, you got the sense that that visit he made at the beginning of the month, that there was genuine anger.
Yes. Yes, I mean, not everything and every move is only communication, although Macron has made a big move, I believe we can say that, on the international stage. But Emmanuel Macron came 2 days after the double explosion. We were still in chaos. There was still blood in the streets. So it takes something to go there. And that's not his country. That's first. Second of all, when he came back, he hosted an international conference that had already gathered more than 250 million euro for emergency help.
And of course, that money has not been dispersed, right? Because
That's what he was talking about actually at the port, because he was questioned whether, the activists, the secours, the activists in the port were asking him, where is the money? Because you've raised more than 250 million euros. So eventually he said that there is some kind of miscommunication between the international organization and people in the ground to dispatch this money. But this money supposedly is available. And this money is not related to the international conference that is supposed to take place in Paris next October.
So how much leverage does the international community have when it comes to forcing Lebanon to reform?
I believe money, but the international community is not the only player. You have Saudi Arabia that remains silent. You have Iran, which remains silent. And you have, in a lesser way, Turkey and Russia at its border through Syria.
Can we cross back to Beirut? And Sophia AMARA, I hope the connection has improved. Sophia, are they feeling the heat, the leadership? Again, it's that question I was putting to you earlier, or can they wait it out? Can they just sit tight and wait for this all to die down?
Well, the answer is complex because, yes, they are feeling the heat. And for the first time, after Emmanuel Macron threatened, he indeed threatened the political class that there would be no more help if after 3 months the situation isn't moving. And there could be even sanctions against members of the political class. So here you see 2 days ago, President Aoun said that he would work for a secular state. The president of the chamber of the parliament, Nabih Berri, he claimed that he was for a total change of the confessional political system in Lebanon. And even the Hezbollah said that he accepted very positively the offer for, or the call of the president, the French president Emmanuel Macron, for a new political pact. So indeed, they feel that the situation now is very complicated. And to answer the question you asked before the connection went bad, compared to the 2015 situation, there is a big difference. Because between 2015 and 2020 or 1920, you had this amazing movement that proved that the young Lebanese want a new system, and you have the blast of the port, and you have all the multiple crises the Lebanese are facing today on economical, financial level. So now I think they feel that something has to change, even though they'll do their best to keep a maximum of their, grip on the system.
Sophia, what are some of the keys you'll be watching for in this press conference by the French president?
Excuse me?
What are some of the key points you'll be watching for in this press conference from the French president?
I expect him to explain that indeed France couldn't accept another solution than to have this prime minister take his responsibility immediately, but that he should, I think he should explain that definitely the members of the government, which means the ministers, should be chosen very quickly, because he knows, and he explained it this morning, that sometimes it takes 6 months in Lebanon to create a government, and Lebanon cannot afford to wait that much, and the Lebanese cannot afford. So I think this is something he should say again very loudly for the Lebanese political party to be very careful about that. He's coming back in December, so he gave them 3 months to push things forwards and to start the reforms, because he has to repeat, and he will repeat, I am sure, that there won't be any reforms without, there won't be any bailout, any financial aid without reform, structural reform of the system, politically and economically.
On the way over, in that interview with Politico, Lionel CHAMI, he was asked, the French president, about this call from the street to have as prime minister not this diplomat who was ambassador to Germany, Mustafa Adib, but instead Nawaf Salam, who is a judge at the International Tribunal in The Hague. And he said, if I'd impose Mr. Salam, we kill his candidacy because we put him in a system in which the parliament will block everything. Do you wish that Mr. Salam had been nominated instead?
Well, I think the question is larger than one individual. If we want reform in Lebanon, we've got to have a good person in power. Not a crony, not someone from the mafia, not someone from the ruling elite. That's one criteria. The other criteria is that the person has to be independent from parliament and from the current political parties which are ruling the country. Why? Because if you want to adopt any law in Lebanon, it has to go through parliament. And if parliament is held by the same crony politicians, then you won't be able to enact any reform. Especially that within the ministries, all the functionaries, all the public servants are nominated by these same parties. So even if you appoint, the Prophet Abraham at the head of the country, he won't be able to implement anything if he doesn't have the means and the independence to do it.
And if there are, as Emmanuel Macron wishes, elections within 6 to 12 months, will it just be the same old candidates who win?
Well, we hope not. But that depends on two things. It depends on the elections being free and fair, as I've said first, and it depends on the capacity of civil society to organize around key figures, around the program, and to put in, the infrastructural strength needed to win an election.
Bilal TARABEY?
I mean, I won't judge Mustafa Adib as a man, as a person, because I don't know him. But what appears clearly is that Mustafa Diab can be seen as a super Hassan Diab, his predecessor. I mean, even in social media, as Lebanese making fun because Diab and Adib, they are just the same letters backwards in Arabic, you know. So I don't, and nobody really thinks that Mustafa Adib, as himself, can implement some sort of a change. The only difference between now and last January is the internal pressure and the double explosion.
He makes that visit to the port on Monday. He gets booed at times, of course. But he did go. A lot of politicians haven't even been. Your thoughts on that?
I mean, I'm sorry, but that's the very least in a normal country.
This explosion of ammonium nitrate at the port, I mean, we had here in France ammonium nitrate explode in 2001 in the southwestern city of Toulouse, and they're still feeling the scars today. How will it change Beirut?
You know, Beirut is like, I mean, this part of Beirut that was blasted looks like a ghost town, ghost city, ghost capital. The heart of the Beirut that was occupied on a daily basis by the youth are gone. Many neighborhoods occupied by old people, old inhabitants are gone. So it's really, really hard to tell. I mean, besides all the memories that are gone, it's really hard to tell what face will have Beirut in the future.
Sophia AMARA, when you think back to that night of August 4th, how much has it changed for you and for that city?
It's terrible. It's that part of the city looks like ground zero. It's very symbolic to know that this part of the city was the point where the population and the youth used to have fun. And at the same time, it was the part of the city where you had the most beautiful ancient mansions and villas and treasures of the Lebanese patrimoine. So it is very painful to go there because you don't even recognize some streets where everybody or that any Lebanese or anybody living in Beirut knows by heart. Yet, Lebanese people always find something positive in disasters. It's a little bit cliche to say so, but it's true. I think that this blast will be like even maybe ground zero, but a page zero. Now we have to see how much the demonstrators and how much the pressure of President Macron, but also the international community, will help Lebanon write a new chapter, a new page, think or rethink the country for this never to happen again.
Because this is the question, right? It was some people talking about malevolent intent and others just talking about, well, sheer incompetence. Sophia AMARA, do you blame someone? How do you rationalize what happened?
You mean the blast?
Yes.
Well, the problem is that today, what is the most unbearable thing to know is that for now, the Lebanese authorities refused any commission, any investigating commission to work on the site and tell the Lebanese people what was really the cause of this double blast, of this disaster. You know, till now, a lot of people are wondering, is it only nitrate of ammonium? Is it an Israeli missile? Is it Hezbollah who was doing some stuff in the port and had a missile unit in the port? We don't know yet. There are a lot of theories, and no serious commission of investigation had been till now give us any result. So for now, Lebanese do know at least one thing, that this is the result of a state that is totally failed. Because few weeks before the blast, the highest responsible, like President Michel Aoun and the Prime Minister, who's gone now, Diab, had received a note saying, we have a bomb in the port. This nitrate should be removed immediately, and nothing was done.
And Lionel CHAMI, you just heard Sophia AMARA. We've heard a lot of conspiracy theories about surrounding that explosion.
Well, yes, but the question is, do they matter or not? Because at the end of the day, there's a question of gross criminal negligence here. For a very simple reason. You don't keep a ticking time bomb in the middle of a city, in the middle of the port, next to some of the most populated neighborhoods of the city. So whether there was criminal intent, whether someone came here and detonated that bomb or not, or whether it was just an accident.
Yeah, we're seeing reports that there were fireworks stored next door.
Yes, like they had 2,750 tons of nitrate ammonium, a highly explosive material, next to fireworks and next to God knows what, because there's no investigation. The Lebanese state hasn't given us the means to know what has happened. The president is still stuck in his conspiracy theory that it might have been an Israeli strike. We don't know for sure, but the indicators that we have don't point in that direction. And even if it were an Israeli strike, it wouldn't matter, because there's no reason to keep these explosives so close to where people live.
In the report that we aired Monday here on France 24, that you and Cyril Payen filed, it was that question for all the Lebanese in the wake of everything that's going on, the economic meltdown, the political gridlock, and now this explosion of whether you stay in Lebanon or you go. People in Lebanon have emigrated, since the 19th century. They've always immigrated, the Lebanese, to earn a living. You're an example of that. And is this any different than before?
Well, you know, the day I left Lebanon was 2 weeks ago. The airport was full. Everybody wanted to leave. Because, yes, we've seen waves of emigration from the 19th century till now, but it's been waves. So during the Civil War, but after the Civil War, people came back, you know, and they put their hopes into this country. They put their money into this country. People who had earned money abroad put it in banks in Lebanon. Children who were born there plan to, you know, make their future in Lebanon. But now with the economic crisis, this is no longer an option for many of us.
Will it be, once again, up to the diaspora? When you go to Beirut, it's quite striking, isn't it? You see construction everywhere all the time. People are always building houses with the money coming from the Lebanese abroad.
Yeah, exactly. The diaspora, in a way, is what has kept the country alive, because we've had no functioning economy beside banks and tourism. We produce like almost nothing in Lebanon, except for agriculture and industry, but in very limited numbers. So in a sense, the diaspora makes the country live.
Bilal TARABEY?
I mean, it's funny because for decades, I mean, I was born from the diaspora actually in Paris, so I might have a take on this one. For a very long time, for decades, people in Lebanon would take pride on their sons, their daughter, their sisters and brother going abroad and making a career or life. My brother is a doctor.
There's that woman you interviewed in the south of Lebanon who said Lebanon's the only country where a mother is happy when her son goes abroad. Was she exaggerating when she said that?
Right now, in 2020, no. And that's the first time we see people talking freely and for the real reasons like this. Because before that, before 2020, before the 20s, let's say, Lebanese would go like, we emigrate. That's what we do since definition. We go abroad, we are merchants, we are doctors, we are architects, we are intellectual. That's what we do. For what reason? Even I, as a kid, wouldn't really know. I mean, why would we go everywhere? But now, the Lebanese uprising last year and this double explosion has put an end, and some would say, finally, on a sort of masquerade. I mean, you had a country that was almost lying to itself, just showing parties, nice car, high-end venues, you know, being like, oh, Beirut is this city where any woman had like facial surgery and all. But that was, I mean, every Lebanese, Lionel can talk about that, like any Lebanese that was actually living in a country knew that this money was from the bank, anything was working, like underground, no metro, no subway, no anything, no electricity 24/7. I mean, that's not a new fact. That's very old. But people were dealing with that and with a sense of dignity, I guess. Yeah, dignity. They won't say, especially to foreigners, what was not going well in the country. That has changed.
Okay, so the irony of this conversation is the two Lebanese are here with me in Paris, and the foreigner is in Beirut. So, Sophia AMARA, have Lebanese been more open with you since the crisis came to a head?
I just want to comment on what Bilal said. I totally agree. Lebanese were into total denial. They were over living, over partying, over showing off, just as it was defying all the things that are going wrong in this country. And indeed, the mothers and families were even before proud of having somebody outside who is succeeding, who is doing great job in any sector. Today, the situation is different. The Lebanese I've met and who are getting out of the country, some have the means, the financial means to go to nice destination like Paris or New York or Berlin. Others are going to very, I'm not going to say the word because it's a little bit rude, but very bad destination like in some countries in Africa that they know nothing about, where it's not fun to live when you come from Beirut, which is the city of fun, because they just want to stay alive. And a mother said, I just want to live because here, even if I'm at home, I don't have any guarantee that I will not be killed, me and my children.
And you had
I don't have electricity, and they just had it. They just want to go where at least when they close their door at night, they know that nothing will happen bad to them or to their family.
And in that report you showed, Bilal, there's the young people there going off to Armenia.
Yes. So his name is Nero. He's from Armenian origin. You have the largest Armenian community outside Armenia.
But he'd never set foot there.
He never set foot there. He barely speaks the language. I mean, he speaks the Armenian from Lebanon with obviously a lot of Arab word in this dialect. He never been there. He doesn't know the country. He doesn't care the papers, but he has some friends there. So he's gonna go there hoping to get the Armenian citizenship. With the Armenian citizenship, it's easier to go abroad than with a Lebanese passport.
And 2 weeks ago, you returned after what happened.
Yeah, but that's a larger trend. If you look at the statistics, more than 50% of the Lebanese people who have a university diploma leave Lebanon. And now the crisis has only gotten worse. Before, we used to leave to be able to make a living. Now, some of us leave because we fear for our lives. After the explosion killed 200 people. It wounded 6,000 people. It destroyed the homes of hundreds of thousands of people. The damages are estimated to be $3.8 billion. So this is going to put a lot of strain on people who won't even have the means to build back their houses because their houses were destroyed. They didn't have a job. There's no social security. There's no insurance. The people who lost stuff after the explosion, they lost everything. And they have to leave if they manage to.
And do you see your future at some point down the road being back in Lebanon?
Lebanon, for so many of us abroad, is home. If the country offers us the opportunity to go back, to live there with dignity, to be able to make a living there, no Lebanese will tell you, no, I won't go back. But the question is, can we go back? Can we go back and make a living? Can we go back and live with dignity? Can we go back and live, a similar life that we'd have abroad, with electricity, with running water, with basic services, and this is what we people abroad want. We want to go back, but not to live like we were living back there.
All right, Lionel CHAMI, I want to thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank Sophia AMARA in Beirut, Bilal TARABEY. Again, we'll have full coverage of Emmanuel Macron's press conference, closing press conference, where he's due to put more pressure on the Lebanese leadership to instill reform. He's sort of given a 3-month deadline, since he said he'll be back in December for concrete steps to be taken. This at the conclusion of a little more than 24 hours on Lebanese soil. On this, the date, September the 1st, 2020, where the country marks its centennial as a modern state. I want to thank you for joining us. More coverage to come right here on France 24.